So I'm going to start with a disclaimer this time. I'm going to start by saying we all want the GNU to work. I think to not want the GNU to work would be to want this country to really go into a state of collapse, which I think we have been close to for a long time. So disclaimer done. I want the GNU to work. But sometimes it becomes difficult being the voice that has chosen to make sure that there is accountability, to make sure that there is transparency so that it does work. And today, my chat with you is really going to be about that, about some of the things that are happening in Parliament, which suggests that maybe it's not really the case. And some of the work that we have to do to make sure that this administration is accountable, to make sure that we don't continue with the same old, to make sure that this change that, it's so evident that the country wants so desperately, you can literally feel it in the air, that this hope that so many people in the country carry actually translates to reality for this country. So I'm going to chat to you just about literally the past 2 days in Parliament and some of the frustration, that one experiences looking and feeling like, if we don't push, it's going to be the same old, same old. I want to first talk about BBBEE. And yesterday we, in the Trade, Industry and Competition Portfolio Committee, had a presentation from the BEE Commission in terms of their work. So I've always maintained that BBBEE has not worked. And I say this being in some ways a beneficiary of BBBEE. I got into corporate at the age of 21, 22, because of BBBEE, to be fair. I was in business as a young black woman from the age of 24, had corporate clients, blue chip clients, multinationals, because of BBBEE. But the reason why I say it has not worked is because you always have to speak for the 61 million. And you have to say in a country where more than 60% of the black people, the black population, who were the most disadvantaged in the previous dispensation in apartheid, if more than 60% of them still live in poverty, if the face of poverty is a black woman, if we still have ownership of the biggest companies in this economy that are not fully transformed, then we can't say that BBBEE has worked. That's why I'm such a proponent of thorough investment into township economy, of seeing the industrialization of townships, of rural areas, because I believe that in order to see transformation, you, one, have to have ownership, but secondly, that you, one, have to have participation that is in the areas where the majority of the population live. So that's the first. And so listening to the presentation of the BBBEE Commission yesterday was a frustrating process because, first of all, that BEE Commission does not have, as one of the members put it, the teeth to bite that it needs. We have to, first of all, recognize the fact that we are working within what I've expressed as a flawed policy, as flawed legislation that hasn't delivered and actually is very limited in having the potential to deliver on the transformation that we want to see. So that's first what we have to acknowledge. But then this presentation by the BEE Commission made it clear that even the institutions that have been put in place to oversee and have been mandated to ensure that it does deliver actually can do nothing. One of the questions that are asked is, what is the consequence management where there has not been compliance? What can the BEE Commission do? And they say they can do nothing, really. I asked about whether they are doing proactive activity in making sure that the companies that need to report are reporting on BEE, and they say they don't have the resources to be able to do that. So really, you have a commission that exists that does the little that it can with the resources and the authority that it has, because legislation just simply does not give it the kind of power that it needs to have in order to effect real change and in order to effect real compliance when it pertains to this already limited legislation. So that's got to change. How do we do that? Through legislation. And so that is another piece of legislation that is on my radar, that is on my list to say, we've got to see how do you start the important work of overhauling that piece of legislation that is BBBEE, particularly the institutions that need to oversee it, particularly the institutions that are established to oversee it, but more broadly, how you amend that legislation to truly be broad-based, to truly make a difference in the lives of all South Africans, all 61 million. All right. The second issue that I dealt with in the past 2 days is that of the Bela bill. Now, the Bela bill has seen a lot of controversy. It has seen a lot of discussion, a lot of engagement, and a lot of misinformation. And I do have to say that, like every bill, while there may be some articles in the bill which, will be contentious and must be contentious, actually, most of that bill, when you look at what the bill is in essence about, it is about transforming an education system which has existed as multiple, or at least two education systems, one that's for the rich and one that's for the rest of the country. And what the bill in its essence seeks to do is to allow for inclusion and to start to build one education system. Having said that, if there are genuine concerns from the public, from stakeholders about the bill, the process that the bill should then have followed was to then be taken back to Parliament. And instead, we had groups like AfriForum and Solidarity privately lobbying the president, who has then put two of those clauses, in fact, the clauses that are most related to inclusion, on hold. And so in Parliament this week, in my member statement, I raised that and raised the issue that we cannot have a situation where things are the same as they were before. We previously bemoaned the participation and the influence of the Guptas during the years of state capture. And now we cannot allow for a situation where the president is privately lobbied again in this country. A different president, a different group of private lobbyists. So that's one of the things that are raised in Parliament today that we have to watch and that we have to safeguard our democracy and the lawmaking processes from. We cannot have that continue. And that has got to change. And that's the work that we've got to do, something that I'm committed to, something that as Build One SA we're committed to. And then, on the last point of what needs to change, the National Lotteries Commission. So I have been watching and following what has been happening with the National Lotteries Commission. I have written to the Minister of Trade and Industry about what has been happening in the National Lotteries Commission, particularly now with regards to the bid for the operating license for the National Lottery. So first of all, let me start here as to why the National Lottery exists. The National Lottery exists so that there is a fund or a source of funds that exists for charitable organizations. A lot of what is supported is early childhood development centers, as well as for excellence in sports and in the arts. This is why this exists. And over the years, there has been a lot of corruption. There's been a lot of maladministration in the National Lotteries Commission because it is an institution that collects high revenue, particularly with this operating license. This is the institution that awards a license to the value of 180 billion. And so we have to watch that very carefully because it's a lot of money. And we have to watch it very carefully, because when you see what the ecosystem looks like, the ecosystem, it's the various retail outlets that operate these machines for the lotto. The ecosystems, the important people in the ecosystem are the charitable organizations that do incredibly important work in this country, work that we need to uphold sectors like early childhood development, to uphold sectors in social development in this country. And so it is critical and it's important. So as we sat in the Trade and Industry Portfolio Committee and heard from the National Lotteries Commission, as a committee, we collectively had a lot of questions to ask, because there are issues which are with the SIU related to corruption. We yesterday heard the Auditor General present to us, and we were presented to and given clarity on some of the material irregularities that have taken place. There has been corruption, which has meant that there are NPOs and other charitable organizations that have not been able to receive grant funding that was due to them. So there is a lot that has happened, and it starts right at the top. It starts from the issue of the board of that National Lotteries Commission. It starts in the issue of how service providers are appointed. It starts on the issue of how, for instance, the panel, the independent panel that is adjudicating this particular operating license has been appointed. Who sits on that panel? Many, many questions that we raise. And I actually want to even look at some that are raised here. Some of the issues are about the distribution agencies. Now, these are the agencies that adjudicate the grant applications and award grants to the various organizations. One of the questions which I've ultimately asked for a written response for are, how are these distribution agencies appointed? We're told they're appointed by the minister, but what is the process? There's a lot of power that lies with the minister, even in the appointment of this operating license, in the appointment of the independent body, as well as in the appointment of the distribution agencies. But how is that overseen, particularly in an institution where so much corruption, over R1 billion worth of corruption has taken place? What is the administration of this institution now doing to make sure that there are checks and balances in place, to ensure that there's good governance in place, starting right from the board and the minister himself? I did receive a response to the first letter that I had sent to the minister asking about such issues as the board remuneration, the process that is taking place in the adjudication and ultimately the awarding of the operating license. And I got very vague responses from the minister. And so I put those questions to the board and the executive, which presented to the Trade and Portfolio Committee. And some of the responses they gave were actually contradictory to what I got from the minister. And I have since written to the minister again to ask for clarity on some of what were vague responses. I put those same questions and started to get some of the answers that were a little bit more detailed from the board today and from the executive today. All this to say, we bemoan state capture and institutions that were captured in the previous administration and previous administrations. This is something that cannot continue. We cannot get excited because of the hope we have in seeing the genuine, forget the role and the importance of oversight and accountability for which I have been elected and for which I sit in Parliament and in the various portfolio committees that I do. That is a commitment that we as Build One SA give to you, that we will always be about you. We'll always be about the 61 million. And always remember that even if you have any questions, if you have any contributions, always feel free to email me, nwebster@parliament.gov.za. There is nobody that's coming to save us. I always say that. We're the ones that we've been waiting for. And we have to make sure that if we want to see change in this country, if we want to see this country live up to the potential that we all know it has, it's up to us.